Well, hi there. Welcome to Streets and Eats. This is episode 37, and we're talking about one of our favorite places, Madagascar. Now, unlike some of the other places we've been, we've only been to Madagascar one time, but we're kind of looking forward to going back because there's so much to see and do there.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries in all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure. Well, I think we fell in love with Africa in general on our first trip when we did the self-driving through Botswana and South Africa. I mean, just the game safaris there are so incredible, and the photography is amazing. But more importantly than that, just the whole feeling of Africa, you know, the light seems different, seems more enhanced somehow. The air seems cleaner and full of just amazing smells. I guess it gets into your skin. So,
well, I've wanted to go on safari since I was a little girl. I don't know if any of you remember the show called Daktari.
Oh yeah.
I told Jim about it, and he said he had never watched it as a kid. So we looked on YouTube, and it's old. Like, I can't even believe I still remember this. But what I remember about it is watching this show and just being so enamored with the idea of being in a four-wheel drive and driving through the bush and seeing animal after animal after animal. I love animals. And so no matter where we are, whether we're in the United States and Alaska, or whether we're, you know, in the hills of Austria, we're looking for the specific wildlife for that area. And that, therefore, you can just imagine how much Africa appeals to us and all the animals that you get to see.
Yeah, and I'd never seen Daktari, but of course, I grew up with Born Free and
Born Free,
right, and Saving the Lions, and there was a couple of other shows that were very similar to it. Even, you know, Tarzan was super popular, but that's definitely what I grew up with. And for me, it was the same. I was really looking forward to getting to Africa and going on one of these wild safaris. And
so we started on safaris, and I mean, the first time we saw elephants in the wild was just amazing in Botswana. And then we went to Uganda and we got to see gorillas in the wild, and we saw chimpanzees in the wild. And we were in South Africa and we saw penguins in the wild. I mean, everywhere we go, we really, really love looking for the wildlife. And in Madagascar, it's even more unique.
That's right. And it's just incredible. And the travel there, the vistas, the villages that you're driving through, it's all very African, but it's like taken to a new level. And yeah, unique is the right word for it. It's just an incredible trip. And it's one of those a few remaining places that you can go that are not just overrun with tourism. There is a lot of tourism there, of course, but it's been very sustainable, I think, up till this point. You don't have a lot of those massive resorts or things like that. So you really have to make the effort to get there, and then you really have to put in a lot of work to plan it. And even while you're there, it can be a very rugged place to travel.
Rugged is also a good word for it.
Well, and we've always liked to self-drive as much as we can. So that's something that we're always looking for. And, you know, after having been there, maybe we could have done it on a self-drive. But in the research phase and just looking and seeing what was out there, it was very difficult to find a rental vehicle, a four-wheel drive rental vehicle that they would rent to us.
It wasn't
without
hard.
a driver.
It was impossible.
Yeah. And then just looking at the road conditions and reading the stories. Well, you know, the one thing I always come back to is there was an episode of Well, it wasn't Top Gear. It came after Top Gear. It's called the Grand Tour, but it was basically Top Gear, the same three people. And the same idea where they were taking vehicles from one part of the country to another part. And in this case, it was Madagascar. And they were going up what on the map is a quote unquote highway along the east coast heading north. And watching that episode was a real eye opener for people who were thinking of driving themselves in Madagascar.
Because remember, they had crews behind them.
Yeah.
We don't have a crew behind us or the budget that they had.
And even still, they ended up with their dismantled vehicles being picked up and put on trucks and brought the last little bit of the way to their final destination. The roads were that bad.
What we're trying to say is, even though we are avid road trippers and we love to drive all over the world, maybe Madagascar is not a road tripping place to drive yourself. Now, we did road trip, but we rented a car.
We rented a car with a driver. And, it really turned out to be a great way to do it. Our driver was a lot of fun to be with. He was super informative. He knew a lot about everything in the country.
He even gave us little tips, like we were driving through Tana, how do you say the name? Antananarivo, which is called Tana.
Antananarivo, right.
And we're driving through there and it's market day and there are literally people everywhere. It's just straight out of a movie where, you can't get through the roads and there's people everywhere.
That's right.
He says, roll up your windows halfway, wrap your camera strap to your wrist. And basically he was, he wasn't scared. He wasn't alarming us, but he let us know that this is a place where with all these people, you need to be careful. So, he told us how to do it. And he was very quiet and sort of unremarkably said it, but it was there and he was taking care of us. And that really made us feel safe.
Yeah. And I think that what I found was if you could get the vehicle, you could self-drive some parts of it with no problems at all. But once you start getting too farther away from Tana, the capital city, the roads really can become quite dicey. Four-wheel drive, definitely. And a driver is a great way to do it.
Now, what do you need to go to Madagascar? It is required for Americans to have visas. But the nice thing is you can get the visa right in the airport. So that's not a problem. The other thing you need to do ahead of time, though, is you need to get your malaria medication because we're talking jungle. We're on the equator. It's rainforest. There were a lot of bugs and they weren't really that annoying, but we definitely got bit a couple of times. So it's very important to take those malarials and be ready for it. And at the same time, when you're packing, you want to make sure that you have long sleeve shirts, long pants, socks that you can tuck in so that when you are doing those hikes, which we did a lot of hikes, you're ready for it.
And some bug spray for sure.
And bug spray.
Now, at the time we went, yellow fever wasn't required. But it was recommended. I would definitely check that before any trip planning to Africa, just to get the most current information. And also, depending on where you're coming from, if you're adding Madagascar to other African travels, depending on what country you're coming from, it would be required. We had ours already, and they did record that when we came into the country. So they did want to see it. It can be very difficult to get to Madagascar. Like I mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of direct flights. Our flight, actually, we flew, at the time we were in Europe. So we flew out of Europe and we ended up going through the Mauritius airport.
Which was funny because we had just been to Mauritius.
That's right.
Not too long before that.
And with a little bit of forethought, I guess, although we hadn't really thought about Madagascar at that time. That would be a good combination.
Yeah.
Spend some time on Mauritius, 3, 4, maybe 5 days, and then go on to Madagascar.
If you have a lot of time, though, because I think Madagascar requires at least 2 weeks.
At least 2 weeks. Yeah. For sure.
It's just hard to get around, like we were saying. The roads are so bad. So even if unless you fly all over the place, well, that's of course going to add up. it's going to take time to get places.
And flying around the country is an option. However, it could be very quick. It could be that you just need to spend an afternoon to get from one part of the country to the other. However, with the weather and with the conditions, those flights get canceled a lot. So it could actually end up taking 3 days.
Or you just don't get there and you spend all your time in Tana.
That's right. And when we were looking at getting around the country, we really looked carefully at that. Would we be better off flying between the different places? And some places you have to fly to. You're just not going to drive to, even with a driver. But those are really remote. And if you've only got 2 weeks, probably not going to be on your itinerary.
Well, we also did want to have more than one driver. We figured we like the idea of just having the one guy who's going to take care of us. Our stuff is there. We get to know him. He gets to know us.
we
and not have to worry about hiring 2 different drivers as we were going around the country.
And Manu was a great driver. Like we said, he took great care of us. He was very careful, and it was kind of fun just going to different places with him because he loves the country too.
He loves the country. He had such an exuberance about his own country, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, you don't see that oftentimes, especially with people who are in full-time tourism positions like that. But he wanted his picture taken almost as much as we did in all the different places. The
place I remember the most this happening, he just sort of floored me. He just cracked me up because here we were in the Avenue of the Baobabs. And of course you want to take pictures of you going through there. And he drops me off and he says, I'm going to come through on my Jeep. Make sure you get me. I'm like, okay. So we were taking pictures of him too. It was just cute. Like we said, he was so excited about his job. He really spent the time to find out where we would like eating, where we would like staying, not just us, but people in general. So he would sort of catalog where he's taken people and where he wouldn't take them again and things like that. I think he was well worth the money.
Yeah, for sure. And it was not an expensive venture as far as that goes. I mean, yes, you're going to be spending money if you're going to rent a self-drive vehicle in an African country anyway. But then to add the driver, I think it was pretty comparable to other places we've been. So
that was fine.
Certainly worth it.
Madagascar is not someplace you're going to go on a budget, I don't think.
No.
I mean, even though the country itself is not a wealthy country, and if you could stick to the economy and just eat local foods and things like that, sure, you probably wouldn't need a whole lot of money, but that's not the case. I mean, your stomach's not in tune to it. The idea of a local hotel versus a tourist hotel is maybe a little bit rough.
Yeah. And saying that, the prices weren't outrageous. It was decently priced, but it's an expensive place to get to begin with. And then getting around the country. Now you can take taxi buses everywhere, and we did meet 1 or 2 people, other fellow travelers that had been doing that, but they had some
horror stories actually
about it. And in fact, during one of our night safaris, one of the taxi buses came through and stopped in the area nearby for a bathroom break, and
ended up leaving a tourist.
They all ended up
And for some reason, his shoes were still on the bus.
They all got off the bus to relieve themselves, and back on the bus, and off they go. And then out of the bushes walks this poor man with no shoes and no luggage, and
no nothing really. Everything was on the bus.
No nothing. Wow.
And it was so sweet because Manu and the other drivers that were there were so concerned about this guy. They were not about to just leave him there.
No.
They were going to take care of him. And in fact, he came over while we were down looking at some chameleons that we had found and things like that. He comes over and he goes, I'm going to take this guy to the hotel and see what I can do. I'll be back for you. Is that okay? And if we had said no, he would have stayed with us. But why would we say no?
Yeah.
We knew we were okay, and we knew how far the hotel was and that he wouldn't be long, and how touching that he wanted to really make sure that this wayward tourist was taken care of.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it was okay. It was kind of sad, but it was okay at the same time.
Yeah. And we don't really know what happened to him in the end, but presumably he got reconnected with his luggage but that is a scary thing. I mean, it was not
It was nighttime
midnight, but it was dark. And when we talk about stopping for a bathroom break, we're not talking about stopping in
At
a rest
huge
area.
gas area.
Because those don't exist. And we're just talking about the side of the road where the bus could pull off. So it is a rough country to travel through. We also met a young German couple that were self-driving through the country on motorcycles.
But they had a guide.
But even they still had a guide. That's right. Also on his motorcycle. And they loved that. They just were so amazed with the country that they've ridden through. And the places that you could get to on a motorcycle that you couldn't get to in a four-wheel drive vehicle were just incredible. So if that's something that you can do, that is definitely an option as well.
But it was rough. I mean, they were hardy
You have
motorcycle
to be
riders.
a good rider for sure.
Yeah. I mean, they were on back roads and then they were on highways and they were in traffic and then they were out in the middle of nowhere. So they really did it all. And they had like a month. They weren't rushing really either.
Right. And we're not talking like we had friends who rented Harley Davidsons in New Zealand and drove around New Zealand on Harleys. No, you're off road. Even the highways are almost always, I would consider off-road. So you have to be capable of doing that. But a great option if you can. So other than flying or the taxi bus, really the only other option is a driver with a vehicle that you've hired. There are some small tours that you could hook up with, but surprisingly not as many as you'd expect.
You can take a large tour where you're specifically going with a group like G Adventures or one of those, but you're going to be slow and you're not going to be able to cover as much ground because there's more people involved.
Yeah. And you won't really save as much money with it.
Well, you won't save any money
if any.
But that's beside the point.
Okay, so why go to Madagascar?
Well, lemurs, of course.
And
chameleons.
Lemurs and chameleons. And just the incredible variety of the animal life. That's the reason to go for sure. And the experiences that we had with lemurs really in all of the parks that we went to were each unique and amazing.
The very first time we came across a lemur, we were hiking and it was hotter than blazes. And I was feeling the heat. We had just gotten there. It was oppressive. It was like 2 PM. We've been hiking for about 45 minutes. And it wasn't a rough hike, but it was just so hot and so oppressively humid that I was starting to feel nauseous. So the group was going on and I basically sat down in the forest. I kind of didn't want to go any further. I was just tired. I asked the tour guide or the guide if he was coming back that way, and he said yes. And I said, well, I'll be here when you get here. And I had no problem staying there. And Jim, of course, stayed with me. So we're sitting on the ground in this jungle. And the next thing I know, I see these eyes peering at me, eye level from me sitting on the ground from around the trunk of a tree. And it was a lemur. And he basically was looking at me like, are you okay?
Yeah.
It was so, it was soulful.
He came down on the ground and kind of inched forward slowly, reached out his hand a little bit like he wanted to pat you. It was
the cutest, amazing thing. And we didn't touch him because we know better. But he sat with us. He sat with us the entire time until the group came back, kind of like, I'll take care of you. Don't worry. It was wonderful. And for a first experience, considering I was feeling ill, especially, I thought it was just amazing. I'll never forget it.
That was in Karindi National Park, right? I believe so.
Yeah.
Which is also near the Avenue of the Baobabs.
Right.
Which I think most people, it's like the iconic scene in Madagascar. If you don't think about the lemurs or the other animal life, then I think everyone probably has this picture of those just massive, giant, almost alien-looking baobab trees lining this one little dirt road, kind of going off into the distance, and just tree after tree after tree. And that's, I think, one of the most incredible spots on the planet.
And I think for Jim and I, it was definitely one of the best parts of the whole trip. We enjoyed all the animals. We enjoyed all the national parks, but the Avenue of the Baobabs was spectacular. So you're there, and Manu timed it so we were there. We were spending the night close by, so we were able to go there for sunset. And we went a couple of times, actually, since we spent the night there. And we took, I said, tons of pictures. But what was cool about it was one of those routes that's very commonly used by the locals. So you would see a person riding down on their bicycle. Then you would see a truck rattle by. And then you would see
a motorcycle,
a family with a bunch of sticks on their heads going by. I mean, it was just... you could sit there all day and just watch this parade of locals that to me is fascinating in and of itself through this beautiful scenery.
And everybody was friendly. As we were out walking with our cameras, they'd stop and say hi and just really happy that people were there enjoying it as much as they enjoy it. And it's their daily walk. But definitely sunset was the time to be there. And, putting another plug out there for having your own driver and vehicle, we were able to be there when we wanted to be there. Whereas we saw some of the one or two of the tour buses, it was never crowded anywhere we went. But we did see, I think, 2 tour buses that were leaving the avenue before sunset. And I just remember thinking, oh, that sucks to be them.
Right.
Because sunset there was spectacular.
And of course, the time after sunset, when the sun is already gone, that's when the colors come out. And that's when you get those beautiful silhouettes. I mean, it was just stunning.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. That's definitely one of the highlights of really all my travel.
And that was probably the one place where the hotel was kind of more of a resort style hotel, but it was still very small, like tiny. It definitely was not like a hotel tower or anything like that. Very small on a beach. So it did have a beach, but very local and just a beautiful place. The other hotels we were in were all pretty nice.
They all varied. I would say they were the equivalent of maybe a 3-star usually.
Yeah.
The ones that were closer into the cities were more hotel-y. And the ones that were more kind of in the countryside were more resorty or African, what do you call those? Yeah, resorts, where you would go and they don't have a whole lot of, they don't have any restaurants around. So you basically are going to have your breakfast and your dinner there.
The meal at the hotel.
Yeah.
Which was always very good.
I wouldn't say it was like the best food that we've ever had on trips, but it was definitely good enough. Yeah. Meaning that it was tasty and it filled you up and you didn't get sick and I mean all the good things, and you had a couple of choices, but you didn't have a lot of choices. Usually it was maybe even only 2. Yep. But it came with a drink and a vegetable and a dessert usually, and we were quite happy with it. And one of the nice things about not having places that have a lot of restaurants around is that you're not always looking for where you're going to go eat. It's kind of nice in that respect. Antananarivo, which I have a hard time saying, obviously, has a lot of pretty good restaurants, and we did eat some good ones there that we can talk about. But overall, and we did eat at a restaurant in another little town. I'll see if I can remember it before the end of the podcast, or I'll put it in the show notes. And that one was pretty cool because it was in this town that was known for frog legs. And it was a marshy area. It was just kind of this weird little off-kilter place that ended up being really delicious. And that good restaurant was packed.
And the chef even invited us back into the kitchen. So we got to go back into a Madagascar kitchen, which was
quite a shock.
Quite a shock. It was really incredible to see what he was able to put out of the kitchen with what he had to work with. Great food. That was a good one. So the lemurs, of course, and we had a lot more, I think, close encounters with the lemurs. Lemur Island was one place we went to where it's certainly not captive lemurs.
No, it's an island though, and they don't swim.
Right.
So in essence, they are sort of captive.
They are in a way. but it's not a zoo. They've been brought in and they have the run of the island, but the lemurs can be a very quiet, inquisitive, and friendly animal. And so in this situation where they're at and they don't have anybody who's trying to hurt them or hunting them, they just became very, very
Friendly.
adapted to humans and friendly. So they would jump on your shoulders and kind of walk around with you. And that was a lot of fun.
It was surprising, but it was great. I mean, who doesn't want to hold a lemur?
Yeah. So I really like that one. I think my favorite national park, though, was Ranamafana. That's where we did that night safari. I really love a good night safari. And just seeing all the little animals. And
that's just a general tip. If you're in Malaysia or anywhere in Southeast Asia, or if you're in Africa, really anywhere that wildlife is a draw, you're going to see so much wildlife if you can take a night safari. So always look for those. I mean, you have to do it as a tour. You can't, that's not something you're going to go out in the middle of the night driving your own car to do. So I would never. Yeah. But so you want to actually sign up for that, whether it's from the resort or on a tour. But it's such a great tip because we have never done a night safari that we didn't come home just
amazed.
Overjoyed with, because you see so many things that you wouldn't normally see.
Yeah. Unfortunately, unless you've got some really specialized gear, you're probably not going to get a lot of good pictures, but the experience is priceless.
Exactly.
And that was the case at Ranamafana. In fact, that was really, I think, the main reason to be there for me was that night safari. However, they also had, at that hotel, they had a really good massage area that I really enjoyed. And maybe it was because it was closer to the end of the trip and we'd been out and we'd been doing a lot of hiking. And it's summer there, so it's, I think, difficult hiking. And we really needed it. So that was kind of nice.
As we would go around the island, which is a huge island, by the way, island is almost a misnomer. Of course it is an island, but it's just massive. You get to see so many people working in the fields or, herding their zebu, which is the type of cattle they have there. It's just, I love that. I mean, I love seeing the rural life and not just being in the cities. Cities kind of wear me out too quickly. I like the broad open air, and I like going to all the natural places and seeing what people do. And of course, along the road, National Route 7 is the main road that you take across the country. So all the way along there, you're running into people who are selling their goods. We saw everything from little toy trucks to fruits that they were selling, baskets,
hand-woven animals, some textiles, not a lot of like carpets and things like that, of course, but baskets and all that handmade stuff. And even the little toy cars you're talking about, those were just these incredibly detailed, like little model cars that were made out of recycled material. We bought, remember the little bicycle we bought? That was,
we bought a bicycle that was like
cool.
that. But the trucks I was thinking of were wooden.
Oh yeah. The wooden ones.
But the point is, there's tons of stuff. I can't even remember all the things that we saw. There was just everywhere you went. The innovative use of materials was amazing to me. And it was just, you would just pull over on the stop, and it was, of course, dirt cheap because it was by locals. So that was pretty cool.
And you want to, as much as you can, you want to make sure you're helping the local economy.
Yeah, for
sure. Of course, while you're traveling. And it's definitely getting into the local economy when you do that. And so just driving everywhere, we talked a little bit about why we had a driver instead of driving ourselves. The roads, some of them were a little bit difficult. Our driver did a great job of driving around.
But there were places, the potholes were larger than the car.
Yeah, that you had to drive into and out of. So you had to know where they were, and you had to be ready for it. and you never really knew what was going to happen after the rain. So, and it rains a lot, even in the summertime when we were there. So I definitely recommend it. But even more than that, having someone else driving for me meant I got to look out the window a lot more. And Madagascar, just driving through the country is an experience. It's just gorgeous. It's beautiful scenery, very picturesque small villages that you're driving through. Some of them are larger and much more crowded, and you get to see a lot of daily life. That's just incredible. Just even out of the car windows. One of the things that really struck me, even the smallest villages, you would drive through and there'd be one little store, gathering area, bar, or a place where you could get cold drinks like sodas and whatnot. But they would almost always have either a billiard table or a foosball table.
Right next door to it.
Right next door to it, sitting outside, and clusters of people around.
Yeah.
Playing.
Yeah, that's right.
I always thought that was interesting.
It was just a fascinating country all the way around. And almost everybody spoke French. They spoke Malagasy as well, but I don't speak Malagasy. But I could understand them if they spoke to me in French. And of course, having a driver, he pretty much did everything with us because why not? He could translate if we needed him to. The only thing he didn't really come into and do with us was the stuff right in Tana. I'm sure he's been there a million times. And plus they had guides that spoke English, so there was no reason for him to go. Tana itself, just like most capital cities, had some really cool things to see. There is a Queen's Palace. There was a pirate museum. There is a World Heritage Site called Abohimanga, which was a grave site, cemetery-like area where they were revering the elders, and had some huts from, long, long ago. And it was just really interesting. Like we said, we stayed there both a night going in and before we left. And the first night we stayed in a cute little hotel that served an amazing dinner. I mean, we were so stoked to get that dinner because we thought, well, if the food's like this, we're in for a good trip. And then the place we stayed on the way out was kind of ritzy and frou-frou, but I mean, Manu knew what he was doing when he booked us because it had the massages, and so we
spa,
we had a little spa day as we were waiting for our plane and saying goodbye to him, and it was just really nice. It was kind of like a way to relax at the end of the trip. I'm telling you, having the driver, I was really impressed with that. Maybe I would be more apt to do that in the future after having this one experience.
Well, he was very receptive to what we wanted to do. So we had a lot of communication before, during the planning process.
We still talk to him.
And he said, well, what do you want to do? And so we gave him a whole list of things that we would like to do if possible. And he kind of advised us on one or two, saying, well, you'd need a lot more time if you want to go here, or you'd have to give up this or this if you wanted to go there during your 2-week period. So we did a lot of that back and forth and came up with, I think, a really great 2-week itinerary where we got to do most of what we wanted to do. And it worked out quite well. And we went in the summertime.
We went in their summertime. We went in December.
And it was very hot. And
it was the rainy
humid.
Season.
But even though it was the rainy season,
it didn't rain every day.
It didn't rain every day. When it rained a lot during the time that it rained.
But also everything was so green, and it's a red earth. So that vibrant spring, summer green against that red earth, it was visually stunning everywhere. I couldn't take enough pictures.
No. And there's fresh produce coming in. We'd see the banana, like these little carts with small metal wheels and a very large platform with just stacks of banana bunches cut right off the tree. And then the one guy on the back who's just kind of guiding it down the road, either pulling it up the hill or riding it down the hill. And just watching these, almost like oversized skateboards fully loaded with bananas was incredible. But, all the produce that was coming in, it's a good time to be there, even though it was very hot and very humid. It made a lot of the hikes in the national parks more difficult because of.
But you got used to it. I mean, that first time I was feeling sick, but I didn't feel sick again.
No, and you just make sure you stay very well hydrated, even more hydrated than you think you need to be. And if you're in decent shape, you'll be okay.
Yeah. It was a fantastic trip. I can't say enough about it. The lemurs were amazing. The chameleons, we saw everything from tiny little chameleons to huge chameleons, all different colors, blues and greens and yellows and reds. And they were everywhere. I mean, they don't move fast. So once you see them, you can get a good picture of them and see what they're doing for a little while. And of course, everybody there, if they knew there was something for you to see, they would point it out to you. And they weren't looking for a tip. They were just friendly people.
They wanted you to see it. They were excited about their country and the wildlife in the country. Well, so the one chameleon experience that I really loved was in Isala National Park. And Isala National Park is further south. It's not in the rain zone, so it's not part of the rainforest at all. It's very dry, and there's some areas where you can hike in through these just incredible sandstone formations and along this one river gorge.
Huge boulders too. Yeah,
giant boulders, and then you end up at this waterfall-fed pool, which is a great place for a swim, which we did. So that was just a cool national park. But then as we were coming out of the park and heading back towards the car park, we were walking by a bush, and I think you saw it first. The guide, I don't think even saw it until you stopped, but there was this probably like 10-inch long chameleons on a branch that was very clearly getting ready to catch some insect. So we stopped and we watched it. And while we were watching it, it did the whole, the eyes bugged out a little bit. You could see it kind of swelling up its throat area. And then all of a sudden, poof, out comes the tongue. It
moves so slowly until that tongue gathers its speed or whatever it does. And then you can't even see it.
Snagged a grasshopper and poof, right back in its mouth. And then it just kind of
sat there and fed for about, we watched him for about 20 minutes, I think.
Chomped away on that grasshopper with a smile on its face. That was probably the best sighting.
Well, and it was the best sighting because we had seen that before. Then they purposely would feed it for us because it is interesting. And that's cool. But this was not programmed part. This was, we happened upon this chameleon that was hunting and eating. To me, that makes it that much better. I mean, it was still cool when they did it for us, but it was super cool when we found it on our own.
Yeah, that's right. So we really fell in love with the chameleons and, of course, the lemurs.
There's tons of snakes there. And the snakes, I mean, I'm sure there was venomous snakes too, but we saw tons of snakes while we were there, and I mean, they were fine. We even saw a snake in the water right at that same park. We really had a good time. There was just so much to do and see.
So many national parks, a lot of great hiking. If, like I mentioned earlier, for riding, if you're a biker, you can do that as well. This is not really the place you're going to go for a beach vacation
or a sightseeing vacation,
or a big sightseeing. But definitely getting out into nature and seeing the wildlife. That's why you're going there.
Yeah. I mean, you go basically, it's kind of like the United States in that respect, because we did go in Antananarivo. We did see a few sites there. We went to the railroad station and had lunch, and we did a few of the things that are always there in the towns, the museums and stuff.
Right.
So we did do that because of course we would while we're there. We went to the palace, but that's the only place that there are things like that. So the rest of the time, you're in national parks and you're out looking for wildlife. And so that you have to make that your goal. And if it's not something you're interested in, hiking and seeing animals and hiking and seeing animals and hiking and seeing animals, then it's not the place for you. But I have to say, if it is the place, if that is something that appeals to you, don't not go, because it's amazing.
Yeah. It's a once in a lifetime experience.
It really, really is. I say it ranks right up there with the Galapagos Islands.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Yeah. And Australia. and South Africa. No, I can go on and on and on.
No, I definitely put it up there with
No, it goes
Galapagos.
way, way up there because it's so unique. The wildlife there is so, just there.
That's right.
I mean, they do have some of the things other places, but lemurs, it's the only place you get to see them.
Yeah.
How fantastic.
So,
and it was so cute. You know the lemurs that you see in Madagascar, the movie, and how they're jumping around on their tails and they're kind of like teasing you and they're mischievous. We saw lemurs that acted that way. We saw lemurs that would just sit by you and be all sweet and cozy. We saw lemurs. They had so many different personalities.
Yes.
It was really amazing. Really amazing.
So check out our website, Reflections en Route. You're going to find a really great article there for planning your trip to Madagascar. We've got a 2-week itinerary that we lay out there for you, what we did and what we recommend. Just going to be the best 2 weeks of your life, I think. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.